Hello, I'm Jose Cancello, and welcome to my final project proposal for wearable devices and computer vision. Today, I'm presenting on a topic that I'm very passionate about, which is the crossroads of art and technology. For this project, I want to create an interactive, immersive digital art experiences that uses computer vision 360 object tracking and pose estimation to drive changes in the art installation environment. TUNECRAFT is not just the art installation itself, but a system of drivers that encourages collaborative play through interacting and moving physical objects in space in real time. The idea for this project is a room or environment to have a multitude of real life 3D objects that users can pick up and move around the room. As the participants move the objects around the room, the environment changes through a combination of projection mapping and generative music. The physical objects are tracked in space, both their rotation and translation on the XYZ, where each unique object's dimensions control or change something in the generative audio composition or the projection mapped experience. So the goal of this project is to create a system that drives interactive art in ways that go beyond traditional touchscreen and mouse paradigms. This project draws inspiration from notable companies that produce immersive and interactive art and experiences. The first inspiration is a company that is no longer in business called Reactable Live, where the company uses a touchscreen table with along with object detection that drives generative music through the placement of different markers and their proximity to each other. Art Tech House and Moment Factory are renowned in the community for their large scale, interactive, projection mapped experiences where they use computer vision to track users in real space, and that affects the gameplay or arts experiences that the users are in. Additionally, there's been work done in Touch Designer using OpenCV in order to do object detection, blob detection, as well as object tracking in real time. The scope of this project is to create an interactive audiovisual installation using OpenCV as the method for tracking objects in real time, Touch Designer, which will drive all of the experience drivers, and then Ableton that will be in control of the generative music. Additional things that may or may not come into play might be Resolume and Touch Designer again for the visual projection mapping components. The key technological focus for this class is object recognition and 6D pose estimation. So that is getting the real-time positional data of individual objects and being able to track each individual object separate from any other object and getting those 60 data points. In addition to that, I'll be using fiducial markers like ARUCO markers to create a bounding box. The idea for the bounding box is so that Touch Designer is able to know what the minimum and maximum values are. So the idea would be a ARUCO marker would be placed on the edges of the perimeter so that as objects are moved within the space, we are able to set the minimum maximum spatial values and configure those accordingly. So in terms of integration, the idea is to have OpenCV scripts written in Python that are running inside of Touch Designer, where that Python script will be receiving camera feed data through Touch Designer nodes. Those nodes will input the video into the Python script. Then that Python script will be responsible for basically parsing through that data using OpenCV, extracting those 60 positional data markers, and then exposing those to Touch Designer for then Touch Designer to essentially route to different programs that are responsible for the projection mapping experience or the audio reactive experience. So for the audio reactive parts, we'll be using Open Sound Control, which is OSC, which is uh, a pretty standard protocol for communicating within software environments. All it requires is two computers to be on the same network, or one computer to be on the same network as other software systems within that computer. In addition to all of this, a reach goal is to create a UI that allows us to change how values are written where they're transmitted. So being able to set what the minimum and maximum values that each parameter should map to. So like for the X, moving it along should maybe normalize a value from 0 to 1 in one instance, or should be able to normalize the value from 0 to 100 in another instance. And so being able to configure that from from the UI standpoint, I think will be a reach goal. But for a minimum viable product for this class, being able to get the real-time positional and orientation data through OpenCV in Touch Designer, being able to export that or broadcast it via OSC or WebSockets would be the minimum viable product for this class. Like I mentioned, potential reach goals are having a projection mapped UI where as users move these different objects in space, the projector is updating the projected UI around that specific object as it's moved and creating a sort of ever changing artistic environment. So, one of the key challenges will be to allow for this system to be extensible, and by that I mean being able to quickly and efficiently change the different variables of the system. So things like which objects is it able to detect, which ones does it care about, and how those are mapped and translated into different outputs. So, a rough schedule of the project would be to begin using Touch Designer, writing an OpenCV script, and being able to import the webcam feed in Touch Designer, and being able to export data through that script in Touch Designer. Once that is figured out, then the OpenCV work can start, and that is where being able to implement the basic object recognition for the different fiducial markers, which are the ARUCO markers, which basically are QR codes. Those will act as the bounding box, and that is very essential for being able to map values in the camera space. And then additionally, it'll be detecting specific objects in that space. And once that's figured out, we will be able to use that 6D pose detection and be able to implement the real-time object recognition for real 3D objects in space. And once we have that, we're able to use that data to then drive Ableton and its music parameters, as well as the interactive UI that'll be projection mapped. So these will be exported as or broadcast via OSE or through WebSockets. And then for the last bit, we'll be finalizing the implementation and potentially putting this in front of real users, creating a real space to actually watch this run with real users. So the technologies that we will be using are we'll be using fiducial markers, which will just be printing out little QR codes and 3D objects. We'll also be using personal computer for the compute power, and we'll also be using physical objects like toys. And the softwares and library used will be using OpenCV for the object detection, which will likely be using the Python library for that. Google Colab will be a place to kind of quickly proof out how that script is running. YOLO, which is you only look once, is a pre-trained object detection model, which we can use to quickly get up to speed with various objects in real time. Open Sound Control is a standard protocol, and UDP is another standard protocol for communicating and broadcasting data with external applications, including the web. And as mentioned before, we'll be using OpenCV and YOLO for marker and object detection. And we'll be processing that live video feed of a space in real time, and we'll be using Touch Designer to run that OpenCV script. A reach goal would be to have pre-trained models, or to have custom trained models on specific objects so that we have a higher fidelity of interaction. And then creating the user interface would, which is a reach goal, would be done through Touch Designer, creating some sort of, at a minimum, little crosshairs or like circles that circle the element and could even have like a name for the element with like what it controls so that people can know what it's controlling, or just have other artistic elements. Thank you, and that is the end of my presentation.